Welcome back to Desk Careers. I am so excited to bring another incredible guest. Today, we are welcoming Dr. Ruba Tabari, who is the clinical director and educational psychologist at the Developing Child Center. Welcome, Dr. Tabari. It's so great to have you with me today.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here.
I'm so excited to be sharing your journey towards your current role, and the pathway that you took is very interesting and definitely one that will inspire and create a spark of interest for young people, not just students who want to go down your path. I think as well for some of the educators around the world might get inspired by your journey as well. So I definitely want to jump into that. But before we do, I love taking my guests on a journey backwards to their younger years. I think sometimes our young people look at role models such as yourself and think, how did they get from where I am to where they are? And that's what's great about these storytelling sessions, because you're taking them on that journey. So let's go backwards. Let's go back in time to those younger teenage years when you were probably in secondary education and wondering, how do I answer the question, that golden question, what do you want to be when you grow up? Can you remember having to think about that? And how did you respond to those questions?
It is very difficult, and I think it's going to be hard to go back that many years, unfortunately, Maria, because I'm pretty old now. Along the same confusion, to be honest. It's really difficult when you're a teenager and you're finishing just about sort of hitting higher grades in secondary school to think about what do I want to do. You're kind of in the middle of trying to discover yourself and find meaning in life, and all these choices in front of you, and you want to make it relevant. And there's so many questions that go through your mind. And I think for me at the time, it was a very silly way of making a decision. But I did because it was there. And I remember we were doing psychology at school, and it was my highest grade. And it came very naturally to me. So when we were taught the lessons and studying for the exams and things, it just made sense to me. And so I thought, well, maybe that's something I'll be good at.
That's right.
And maybe that was the spark.
So did you take it in secondary school, or were you attracted to it when you left secondary school and started that journey?
No, actually, it was offered at secondary school. So it was one of the IB subjects that you could take when I was doing school. So I don't know now if it's offered as an IB subject, but it was on offer. So I took it and I got very interested in it. And like I said, I got very high grades in it, and it seemed to make sense. It wasn't hard work. And I thought, at a loss of what else to do, I thought, well, maybe I'll be good at that. So I'll try that path.
And that's very interesting, because you then decided, I'm going to do my bachelor's of psychology. But after you completed your bachelor's, you took some time off, what we call the gap year. And in that time, you were doing discovery in other ways. But then you went back to university and you did a postgraduate certificate in education, which then took you on your career as an educator. What made you go down that route if you knew psychology was something of interest, but yet you decided to become a teacher as opposed to continuing on the path which you then took when you started your master's?
So the thing about psychology, when you do your bachelor's in psychology, it's a very general degree. And so you're left with the same dilemma as you are in secondary school, which is, what do I do now? Because you can't really just use psychology. You can't go, and it's not a vocational training, the bachelor's. So it was the same sort of crossroads. And again, you have to ask yourself, what do I like doing? What am I passionate about? What do I enjoy? And to be honest, throughout my secondary school and throughout my life, I've always enjoyed animals and children. So it's one of the two. Those are my things that I enjoyed. So I decided to try and work with children and see where that took. Because in my mind at that point, I knew what I didn't want to do. I knew I didn't want to work with adults. And I knew I didn't want to do clinical psychology. And so I thought, okay, I wasn't too keen on social psychology. So you have to go kind of, it was easier sort of to eliminate rather than decide. And at the time I thought, okay, I'm interested in organizational psychology or possibly educational psychology. And I went the path of educational psychology because I've always enjoyed children. And so that's what took me into teaching.
And
A
that's
lot
really,
of crossroads.
yeah, no, it's amazing that you did that, because you're also showing our students and our educators that it's in that discovery process that you find your way. Sometimes you don't need to know at 16 what you want to do. You want to know what you enjoy learning and then discovering how you can enjoy that. Let's go back to the gap year. What did you do in that gap year that helped mold and shape the person you are today?
So I taught exercise. That's another thing. I loved exercise. So I taught exercise, and I went and worked as an assistant in a nursery, in a school with a nursery, sort of kind of FS1 stage, just to see what it's like. So I helped out. So I did both those things in that year, and decided, yes, I do enjoy being with children and teaching. So, but with a bachelor's, you have the option, obviously, of doing the postgraduate course in education and going straight into teaching with a psychology degree.
And
so that's what I did.
Where on that journey did you think, you know what, I love being in the classroom, I love children, I have a feeling I need to be doing it in a different way, I'm going back to university?
I can't really, I'm not sure I know it to pinpoint the exact moment, but I do know that, like I said to you, I've always enjoyed playing with children. So even as a teenager, if we went to visit somebody and there were kids, I would always gravitate towards playing with the little ones. I enjoyed it. And it's interesting because I know I get a lot of parents who panic and worry that the older children want to play with the younger children, right? I'm saying this and I'm remembering comments from parents like, why don't they play with children their age? But it wasn't about maturity. I just enjoyed children the same, and I think it's just connecting. I found children in FS1 fascinating, and they're so raw in their emotions, and everything comes out. And, you have so many laughing moments where they bring all the news from home and things like that. It just felt very enjoyable. And the thing about teaching as well is that no 2 days are the same, and that's quite nice. If you don't really want a career where things are similar and there's a lot of repetition, then working with people is definitely variable and varied and diverse. So, it's like, I don't think in my life I've ever had 2 days the same in all my career between teaching and being a psychologist.
That is so interesting. So take us on a typical day for you. I know that no day is the same, but what would a typical day look like for an educational psychologist?
So I'll go down the route of a more typical day rather than my day, because my day is, because I have the management responsibility, and also it's not really typical anymore. But you might start the day by visiting a school. You might observe in a class, and then more often than not, if you're in the UK, you'd be responsible for a number of schools. So you might be in a different school on different days, different students, different teachers, different possibly communities and areas. You might observe, you might meet parents, you might sit with teachers, you might take a student out and assess them. You might be involved in a collaborative work in a working party on some document. Certainly in the UAE, you'd meet the parents, you'd visit schools, and just getting around to all the different schools, meeting all these different people, all these different children, it creates that variety. So although in some ways the work is the same in the sense that you are still doing the consultation, you're still working with children, but every time you work with a family, it's a new story. You talk about narrating stories, and that's really what it is. Every time we sit with a family for a consultation, it is a story. You're listening to someone's life story. And it's for me, it's a privilege, and it is fascinating. And then you meet the child, and you're trying to put all the pieces together, trying to make sense of who that child is, what their life is, and then to sort of guide people involved in that process. So, yeah, there is repetition, but because the people are different, there's always a different slant to the story.
That is so incredibly interesting. And I know that young psychology students today, they are thinking just what you said is, what do I do with this? Well, where will this course take me to? Now that you are where you are, as you said, you're also wearing a business hat as well. How do you wear two hats at the same time, but remembering why you started this career, the passion for helping young children? Because that's a tricky one, isn't it? To kind of balance the two hats.
I think there were times when I've worn more than two hats. Few of them. When I mean, sort of being a mother, when I had my children at home, and you had to balance that as well. So it's a lot of hats that I think as a mom you go through, as well as an educator. And if you have a career, and there's a lot of things you need to balance and juggle the whole time. And I think I never forget the passion, because throughout my career I've always maintained a clinical practice. I've never let go of that, because that's what brings me a lot of joy. But I also discovered a new role for myself. So when I joined here, I started working with the adults as the clinical director. And I found that there is also a lot of similarity in how you motivate them, how you empower people, how you create bonding. So I felt that I could use the same psychology principles, but at a different level. So I think as for balancing, it's about being very good at time management. You have to be able to really dissect your diary and make sure that everything is where it needs to be. And I have beautiful colors in my diary. I've got like 5-6 colors, because I need those to see what I'm doing at what time of day and what hat I'm wearing.
That is so true. Being able to have that kind of structure and clarity, and being creative as well, would you say, in how we create that schedule for ourselves. I know that you recommend to young people as one of your top tips that they should learn about the role. And that's what we're doing right now, is we're helping them to understand the transferable skills behind the role, as opposed to just what are you going to learn in an academic setup. But how do you continue to learn about evolving your role? And I think as professionals, we're always evolving. We're adapting to change and times, technology. What would you say a young person could do to learn more about the role of an educational psychologist?
I would advise all young people, if it's open to them, to do internships. I really do. I think it's so important to live that life, walk in somebody's shoes as much as possible. Obviously, our work has a lot of confidentiality, and some things may be not available to them. But if they come and talk to somebody, talking to someone is not the same as actually spending a week and looking at what's happening and getting a feel for the diversity within the role. So definitely internship would be one of them. I know there are a couple of websites, and the British Psychological Society is also very good at that, is that it gives them a description of all the different psychologies and what they might do in a day. But nothing beats internship. And when you're learning, and if you choose to go to university and do psychology, again, use some of that long summer holiday, 4 months to spend a little bit of time and get experience in different areas in psychology to see what appeals to you, and to really reflect on your interests. Do you like working with adults? Do you want to be hands-on, involved hands-on? Do you like report writing? If you hate report writing, then maybe educational psychology is not the one for you. So lots of things to consider.
And I know that you also said that they should be prepared for years of study. Let's bring that number. Let's put that number out on the table. What is that number that they should be recognizing?
So you're looking at about 7 years when you're fully sort of on your own practicing, because the training's changed. So you're looking at 3 years to get your bachelor's, and then for most programs now you can go straight onto a doctorate, which is another 3 years, and then you have a supervision year. So you're looking at 7 years. When I did it, I had to do postgraduate, then teach for a while. So I did 3 years, and then 6.5, 7. Yeah, 7. You're looking at 7 beyond school. Everybody's so excited to finish school and they think it's over, but not really.
And I think that also doesn't include all the little courses that you take along the way as well that are not affiliated with university. It's how to use technology and the up and coming events and conferences and seminars. So
yes,
basically anyone thinking about a career like this should be prepared to be a long life learner and evolving with education. You have to love to study and to learn, is what I'm feeling from this career.
You have to learn. You have to continue to learn. And that's part of also of maintaining your license. But I think what I want to say to young people is learning as an adult is not like learning at school, because I find myself repeating it to a number of students that I see. It's not the same. The further up school you go, the kind of you specialize, you start to narrow down the subjects you're doing, and you're doing things you love. When you're doing things you love, it doesn't feel as laborious as having to go to all the lessons in school that you may not enjoy. So learning as an adult is not like learning as a student. You pick your courses, you choose your interests, and you're interested. There's motivation. It's a different level of enjoyment than a regular school day.
Take us through the technological changes and advances that you experienced as a professional, particularly through the pandemic. I think that's pushed many of us into using technology in ways we never had to before to remain sustainable, first and foremost. And of course, in your case, to continue supporting young people and their families. How did technology evolve for you in your career?
So for one thing, it taught us that we can do a lot online, which we had never done. And here we are. It's a perfect example. So like everybody, like many businesses, we had to go on lockdown. And then we realized, well, actually, we can do therapy. There's a lot of value in teletherapy, and research has shown that it really works. So there's a lot that we could maintain online, and we could build rapport online, which we didn't think in the past. We never even considered trying it, actually, to be honest. Mm-hmm. So now it's opened our role to a global audience, really. Before it was only schools that you could reach, and now you could basically work with anybody anywhere. So that's in terms of practitioner level. But I think in terms of also professional development, it's enabled us to attend courses and be involved in things that maybe in the past you would not have been, because you'd have to fly and the cost became, difficult between the flights and hotels and so on. And there are so many, tools now, and it's opened our eyes to all the different technologies, assistive technology that we can use to support the children that we work with, which in the past, maybe we were a bit more hesitant to do.
Just before we come to a close, I'd like to talk about a little more detail into the practice of what you do. Although you're helping young people, you're really helping parents as well. It's a family effort, would you say?
It is, because at the end of the day, I'm a great believer in looking at children holistically. And by that, I mean, we're part of many things. We're part of a school community, we're part of our nuclear family, we're part of an extended family, and you can't separate, you're one person and you're influenced by everything around you. So when we're working with students, invariably we end up working with parents as well, whether it's about the dynamics at home or parenting approaches or how to support children. We work with the schools, and it's really about bringing that that whole team around the child together to try and move forward to the benefit of that student. And when they're older, the student themselves as well become a big player in that as well. So parents are integral. And also I am a believer that, your child is yours for life, where school is a small blip in their life. So for me personally, when I work with families, it's very important for me that if I am working with a child with additional needs, that the family is very, has a clear understanding of, what it is, what the implications are, how to support, and how to support beyond just this year that I meet them. Like I said, they have their child for life. Your child is yours. You may be at school now, but you leave that school, but they're not going to leave their child behind.
So true. So young people wanting to go down this path, I'm almost hearing it's not just about doing work shadow and experiencing work in the practice. It's also about being exposed to young people, looking at how families communicate, learning to really understand the dynamics in relationships, building communication skills. What am I missing out?
So if somebody's interested, let me put it, if somebody's interested in working with young people, not just working with young people from, say, the age of 3 to 19, working with families, trying to unravel the learning process for young people, what's going on for them, what works, what doesn't, getting to that deeper level than then maybe a teacher would, and trying to put the pieces of a puzzle together and saying to themselves, well, what is it that's going on here? What are the barriers? What's not working? What's working? And then you're using your psychology tools to get the answers to these questions. So it is a very involved bit of work. You need to be able to work with young people. You need to be able to work with families, and you need to enjoy a little bit of number crunching and testing, that kind of fact finding, because at the end of the day, it's not just about sitting with people. We need the tools to help us get that information. So if you are interested in things like that, then definitely this would be a career that would be interesting. But if you're not, and you kind of, I don't know, maybe don't enjoy sitting with people a lot, maybe you prefer number crunching, or maybe you prefer to be out and about a lot and on the more creative side, then maybe this isn't necessarily the career for you. You have to be very people orientated, and you have to care. You have to want to be involved in looking after people and listening and trying to support.
Thank you so much, Ruba. That was absolutely incredibly insightful. I appreciate your time, and I know that our young students and students around the community will much appreciate learning from you.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of another incredible conversation. Today, we were speaking with Dr. Ruba Tabari, who is the Clinical Director and Educational Psychologist at the Developing Child Center. Dr. Tabari, where can we find the Developing Child Center?
It's in Imsukim, and it's not far off from Troitrams on the Al Wasser Road. It's in a villa, Samari Street.
Excellent. And that is here in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. I'll see you all at our next Desk Careers Digital Spotlight.